my bike have made it out here to Finale Ligure all in one piece. And that's thanks to me learning a few traveling mistakes over the years, and mistakes I've learned the hard way that I want to share with you so that you don't make those mistakes and you can make it out in one piece too. So stick with me, and if you have any tips of your own, do leave them in the comments below. If you have a bike box or a bike bag that requires you to take the wheels off of your bike, you'll no longer have a disc between the pads in your brake calipers. Now, if you accidentally press the lever, or if your bag gets knocked and that lever gets actuated, that lever will move the fluid and that will close the pistons in your calipers, which means it will squeeze your pads together. Now, in some cases, those pads could actually stick or seize together, and you might have to buy some new ones, so that's not ideal. Also, if you were to take your pads out and those pistons were to continuously close together, they will eventually pop out of the system, potentially. So there's two things you don't want. Now, what I do is I use a pad spacer in between those pads to keep them apart. Now, if you don't have the correct pad spacer for your brakes, then you can just get a piece of card, nice clean piece of card, and wedge that in between the pads. And maybe you could use a bit of tape, maybe some masking tape or electrical tape, just to keep it in there. But either way, you just want to make sure that nothing compresses. And when you get to the other side, it's a good idea to have a nice plastic lever or a pad spreader to make sure that you spread those pistons and pads back out before you put your wheels back in. If your handlebars have to come off to get your bike in the bag, then that means there is potential for it to move around and scratch your bike. Now, obviously scratches aren't fun, they don't look great, but if you were to scratch your stanchions or even the air can or the shaft on your air can, then that would be detrimental to the performance of your suspension. Now, what happens if you get a really deep scratch in, say, your stanchions? It will then create a bit of a hole in order to draw water, mud, or even dirt into your forks, and that will damage the system. So to avoid this, I always have a bit of foam, which I wrap around the stanchions to make sure that there's a barrier between anything that moves to try and protect it. If you don't have any foam, then you can use an old rag, an old towel, maybe even an old t-shirt, just to protect them, and maybe even the shaft on your air can as well. Now, this one is an absolute classic, which I'm ashamed to say I have actually done in the past. Now, if you don't remove your derailleur from its mech hanger, which is the piece of metal attached to your frame, if you have one, then it can get damaged. Now, these mech hangers are designed to bend. The whole reason is if you were to bash your derailleur against a rock, then this thing bends so that your derailleur and your frame doesn't have to. So it's actually meant to bend. And that means that it can bend really easily if it's knocked in transit. So what I like to do is I take my derailleur off and I leave it loose in the bag. Now, sometimes I'll wrap it with some foam, or I might wrap it with a towel, or you could even pop it in one of those padded envelopes. And it might be an extra safe idea to take your mech hanger off as well, but I always bring a spare on holiday because you never know when you're going to bash that thing. Right, can you imagine forgetting the axles on your bike? Well, actually, one of our presenters did this a couple of months ago. I won't name names, Richard Payne. But basically, get yourself into a routine to make sure you don't do this. What I always do is I put my axles back where they belong. So I always screw the axle back into my forks, screw it into the rear triangle as well. And I know that that is my routine and I'm not going to forget them. However, you do sometimes have pockets in bags. Maybe you want to be that person who always puts the axles in the bag. Whichever way is, don't forget them. And here's a bonus tip for you when it comes to axles. Clean them up. Remove all of the grease when you put it into the bag so that it doesn't gather all of the dirt and dust that's hanging around in your bag. And then bring some grease with you so that you can re-grease it and put it back together when you're on the other side. let's talk about some hand luggage rules, because you're not going to be able to take your tools in your hand luggage at all. I don't think any airline allows for that. So you'll need to put them into your checked bag or into your bicycle bag. Now, greases and things like gels, for example, anything that's a liquid will be subject to the liquid rules of your airline. So they may say you can only take things that are 100 mils and you might only be able to take a maximum of 1 litre. So do check the rules if you're planning on bringing gels or greases or anything like that in your hand luggage. Otherwise, put them in your bike box or put them in your checked luggage. And then finally, there is CO2 canisters, which are pretty much a blanket no-no in your hand luggage, checked luggage and your bike bag. So it's probably best that you travel without them if you don't want them confiscated, and then buy them when you get to your destination. And bonus tip for you here, when it comes to your helmet, that is classed as safety equipment. So it shouldn't have to go into any of your luggage or your bike box or even your hand luggage. So you could have the maximum size luggage bag that you're allowed to bring and then still bring your helmet on top of that. So carry it separately if you can. And sometimes I even sneak a few gloves and glasses into the helmet as well, just to max out that space. Anyway, those are my 5 biggest mistakes that I've definitely encountered over the years, and hopefully you can learn from those and avoid them in the future. But have I missed any? Let me know down in the comments below and help out that GMBN Tech community.